Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the sixth lesson of our Arabic alphabet course. Let's begin. Today we're going to talk about the Arabic alphabet Raa and Zay. Raa and Zay. Raa looks very similar, but Raa has no dots and Zay has one dot. This is Raa and it has no dots. This is Zay and as you can see it has one dot on top. Raa sounds mostly like the letter R in English language. Zay sounds pretty much like the letter Z in English language. So as we have previously discussed, we need to find the English equivalent of the Arabic alphabets. So the English equivalent of Ra is R. This is because it's very sounding like Ra. The letter R sounds very much like Ra. And the letter Z sounds very much like the letter Z. This might cause some confusion as we have attributed Zal in the previous lecture to letter Z, but there is no confusion. Since in English language there are no two sounding letters, we have to use the same letter for two things. So we are using the same letter Z for Zay and for Zal. This should not cause any more confusion. The pronunciation will tell you the difference in Zal and Zay. Now let us move forward. Now let us move on to the pronouncing part of Ra and Zay. Ra sounds mostly like R. So first you need to pronounce R. R. And then check where your tongue is while pronouncing it. Check the part of your mouth where your tongue touches. Then bring your tongue a little bit more forward. Ra. Bring your tongue a little bit more forward and make your mouth go round, like how you do when you pronounce O, right? You make your mouth like a round circle. Same you should need to do for the letter Ra. Bring your tongue a little bit forward and make your mouth round. Then you will find the sound of Ra. Ra. Then Zay sounds exactly like Z. There is no difference. The part of your mouth where Zay comes round is exactly the same where the part of the mouth Z comes from. Okay, so Zay and Z are from the same part of the mouth. There is really no difference. The letter Zay has two names, Zay and Zaa. Many of you might have been confused when I told you that this letter is Zay, as you might have already remembered that this letter being as Zaa. This is because different parts of the Arabic world teach the name of this letter differently. So this letter is thought to have two names, Zay and Zaa. However, the most pronounced name of this letter is Zay. The most common name of the letter Zay is Zay, not Zaa. Zaa might be more popular in certain parts of the world, but Zay is most commonly used in the Arabic world. Now let us see the four forms of Ra and Zay. By itself or in its original form, Ra looks like this. It is a downward curve. At the beginning, Ra is the same as its original form, but it has another letter after it because it's a part of a word. In the middle, Ra has an extension behind it as it's connecting with the word behind it, and it is not connecting with the word after it. That's why there's a hyphen here. At the end, Ra is connecting with the word behind it, and there's no other letter after it. So if you want to see an example of this, for the beginning version, the example will be something like this. Rakaba. Rakaba. This is Ra and after it there is a space and then there is Kaf. After that, for the middle version, it will be Yarkuzu. So we see that the hyphen there is supposed to represent another letter. So in this case, the other letter is Kaf and it's coming after Ra. Over here, there's a small extension behind Ra. This is because it's connecting with the word with the letter before it. And in this case, it is Ya. The letter before it is Ya. And then after it is again a small space, and then the next letter comes, which is what this hyphen represents. At the end, we see that Ra is connecting with the letter before it, but there is no other letter after it because that's the end of the word. So this is Ba, it's connecting with the letter before it, but there is no other letter after it. Same thing goes for Za or Zay. Za or Zay. By itself, they have the same form, the downward slope, except that Zay has a dot on top. At the beginning, Zay has And Zay has the same thing as Ra, but it has a hyphen, which means it has a letter after it. At the middle, Zay has an extension just like Ra and another letter after it. At the end, Zay has an extension and there is no other letter after it. So as we see in each of these cases, Ra and Zay are similar. This is because the only difference between these two is the dot, and they both have been grouped in the same letter. The same body curve is what groups them as the same letter. That's why in many parts it's controversial as if it's Ra or Zay. However, we know that the only difference between Ra and Zay is the dot. So if you memorize the dot, you will know the difference between Ra and Zay. Ra, as we have seen, has no dot. Zay has one dot on top. Now, as we saw in the case of Ra, the letters do not connect with the after letter. Just like in the case of Alif, Dal, and Zal, Ra and Za does not connect with the other letter. Ra and Zay do not connect with the other letter. So in a word, there will be a small space between these two letters, and then the next letter will come. This is because Ra and Zay are one of the 6 letters that do not connect with it. So let's revise all the letters that do not connect with the following letter: Alif, Dal, Zal, Ra, and Zay. With this we complete 5 letters, and there's one last letter which does not connect with the following word. Alright, so now let's move on and see what other things we have to learn. Many students have the confusion of Dal, Zal, Ra, and Zay. We have seen that Dal, Zal, Ra, and Zay have their many similarities. One of them being that Zal and Zay share the same English equivalent, Z. Also, other similarities can be seen as Dal and Ra have no dots, and Zal and Zay have the same dot in the same position. This can cause confusion in the Arabic text, but as we see in each form, Dal and Ra are quite different from each other. Especially in the middle form, if you see, it will be very, very different. The middle and the ending version of these two alphabets are extremely different. So, I think the only confusion comes in the beginning form. For this, we will take certain examples to help us differentiate. So, we'll take the previous examples, Dakhala, so that it becomes clear to you. So, Dakhala and Rakaba. Alright? So, Dakhala and Rakaba are the two examples we have chosen for today. So, Dal, as you can see, is like this, and Ra is a downward slope. Ra goes down and Dal stays on level. So if you can imagine a line here, you will see that Dal is on top of the line and Ra has a little bit gone down that line. This can be extremely useful in differentiating the Arabic alphabets. Dal also has a look of the opposite version of C. So if you look at the reverse version of C in the English language, you will see Dal. This is also another way you can differentiate Dal and Ra. Dal and Ra have many similarities. They do not connect with the following letter, but the other differences cannot be ignored. Dal body is completely different from Ra body. Dal has an angle, so you can see this is an angle, but Ra has a big downwards curve, it goes down. Similarly, Zal and Zay also have their own examples. This is Zal, Zakara, and Zay we have Zakada. So we see that Zal has the same thing as Dal except for a dot, and Za also has the same thing for Ra. Za or Zay also has the same thing for Ra except for the dot. So as we can see here, Dal and Zal are completely different from Ra and Za. In the middle versions, we see that their difference is pronounced, but the only confusion comes in the beginning version. So, to help us differentiate between the beginning version, we saw 4 examples of Dal, Zal, Ra, and Zay. I hope this was beneficial to you. If there are any questions, please be sure to comment below. And if you like this video, please be sure to subscribe to this channel. Thank you.